Read a second time. I call a member for Newtown.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak on behalf of the Greens on the Government Information Public Access Amendment Sydney Motorway Corporation Bill 2016. As has been outlined, the object of this bill is to amend the Government Information Public Access Act 2009 to provide that the information held by the Sydney Motorway Corporation may be accessed under that Act. I thank the member for Strathfield for bringing this bill to the House and acknowledge the work that she is doing to try and push for more transparency around this project. The fact that we are here today arguing to bring basic transparency to what is the largest government transport infrastructure project in the Southern Hemisphere, with a cost that outranks the cost of the Channel Tunnel crossing from France to England, is highly indicative of the way that New South Wales politics is rapidly sinking back to the bad old times when secrecy and backroom deals were the order of the day. The question has to be asked, or did we ever leave? Today in this Parliament we are faced with the complicity of senior ministers in the deplorable process of allowing our Parliament to become the handmaiden of private corporations, and for our public service to become nothing more than a rubber stamp for projects such as WestConnex, which would never pass muster if they were subject to proper objective analysis and evaluated against well-developed alternatives. Something that has never occurred for the WestConnex process, despite the fact that there are $16.8 billion going into this polluting motorway, and despite the fact that the SEARS, the Secretary's Environmental Assessment Requirements, demands alternatives to this mega tollway project to be properly explored and presented. They have never been undertaken. Premier Baird may hide behind the very roads-enthusiastic roads minister in the other place, Duncan Gay, for overseeing, but it's got to be clear that he is overseeing the destruction of the New South Wales Public Service and the involvement of the New South Wales Public Service in the delivery of projects like this. These so-called private-public entities which woo banks and private companies into sweet deals from the wholesale sell-off of many of the state's major assets, lands and services in a way that is not in the interests of the people, but is actually in the interests of the corporations and the big businesses that fund and fuel the New South Wales Liberal Party, the New South Wales National Party, and unfortunately when we see that it is the businesses that are driving, it is the corporations and the profit motive that is driving the decisions that are being made in this state, not the interests of the people. WestConnex is perhaps the flagship example of this, of a privatisation and destruction agenda that seeks to put communities last and put the interests of corporations and profits first. Apart from the information we get from press releases announcing billion-dollar contracts that have been awarded for WestConnex construction, the community, the public and the media have only been able to access contracts via the New South Wales GIPA Act. And these contracts are worth, from what we can tell so far from the ones that we do have information about $165 million, is a figure that is only gleaned because of the information available under GIPA. But this is all prior to the establishment of the Sydney Motorway Corporation. They do not include the details of the huge billions of dollars of construction contracts that have been awarded to companies like Leighton's and Samsung. Leighton's, which has been so publicly exposed for their illegal activities and million-dollar bribes paid to gain overseas contracts in Iraq and Algeria. We can't see the details of the contracts, but we do know that many of them were awarded after the Sydney Morning Herald's first expose of bribery scandals in 2011 and Leighton's own reporting of the actions of Leighton's offshore to the Australian Federal Police in early 2012. And additionally, we can't see any of the contracts that are under $150,000. Another issue that needs to be dealt with in the future is along with the fact that the information about contracts is currently removed from public access when the contract is completed. This government is going to endless attempts to try and ensure that there is no public scrutiny, of this project. And the question is to be asked, why? It's because they know it's a dud. It's because actually if they opened up the books, and they looked at it and they looked at the alternatives and asked the question, if we spent $16.8 billion solving Sydney's congestion transport problems, what would we do? If they asked that question and looked genuinely at the alternatives, they know that a 33-kilometre polluting private road with really expensive, massive tolls is not the answer. And yet these companies that have laid the framework for this disastrous project, Leighton's and ACOM being the one with a shocking reputation in relation to problematic traffic modelling and the Brisbane's Clem 7 tunnel, are now the ones that are getting a whopping slice of this WestConnex cake, a huge transfer of public money into private hands. Leighton's and ACOM were brought in right at the beginning at the establishment of the Sydney Motorway's project office. They helped provide the initial business case and design for this infrastructure monster, and they are reaping larger and larger contracts as this project is developed. But now, without GIPA, the whole situation has become even more opaque, and it is incumbent on us as the decision makers for how public infrastructure is funded and built in this state that we question why it is now all being moved to this secret position. Recent reports have seen that Sydney Motorway Corporation has sent a request proposal to investment banks, inviting the likes of Macquarie Capital, Goldman Sachs, UBS and boutique banks to pitch for advisory roles to put together a $1.5 billion plus new funding package. Unless this important bill goes through the Parliament, the details of this funding package will never be known. Even with access to GIPA, we know that the details will be obscured, as they were in the updated business case that saw many of the information, much of the important information redacted. This government is attempting to hide the details because they know that the details do not add up. And now we are seeing that the obscurity around the Sydney Motorway Corporation is existing outside of the GIPA Act. We are here as members of this place, elected to this Parliament, because we are accountable to the people. But instead, what we are doing is hiding the decisions about the largest infrastructure project in this state in private entities, handing over the oversight to consultants and unaccountable corporations who are wreaking havoc on our cities and our neighbourhoods. The Liberals here and in Canberra are happy to divest their responsibility to corporations to govern on their behalf. This is unacceptable. Somewhere along the line, democracy is getting in the way of their privatisation agenda. And what better way to interrupt that and disrupt the fact that people are starting to ask questions than to simply remove the ability for people to access open, transparent information about the infrastructure projects that they're delivering, than setting up a private Sydney Motorway Corporation in August 2014 that attempts not only to hide information from the public record, but to fundamentally remove the public service from the planning and delivery of public infrastructure in this state. Now, all transactions concerning WestConnex are signed off for by the Sydney Motorway Corporation's board. It's unclear how they are accountable. It's not Premier Mike Baird or Treasurer Gladys Berejiklian or Transport Minister or the Roads Minister or the Planning Minister who people can go to and ask about these projects. It's actually 7 individuals whose names probably will be a little less familiar to the public listening. Peter Brett, Penny Graham, Mary Plowman, Cameron Robertson, Rod Pearce, Leong Frew and Dennis Cleash. They're now the ones that are making the decisions about this $16.8 billion project, not the people that were elected to allegedly deliver on this construction project. The efficient transfer of money and power away from the New South Wales government and public service into the hands of private corporations who will never operate with the transparency and protocols required for a well-functioning public sector is nothing short of highway robbery. And all of this is done under the cloak of commercial incompetence, for as I mentioned earlier, GIPA requests are often highly redacted or not released at all. So while we are here with this bill attempting to bring some semblance of transparency to the body that will be managing over $3.5 billion of federal funds and more than $1.8 billion of state funds, let us be clear that this is only one step that will move us towards more transparency and accountability around this disastrous project. Federal funding is going into this project. State money is going into this project. And yet at the same time, the processes around it are so appalling, are so disturbing, and the impact and destruction on communities across the 33-kilometre route are astounding. This bill is an important first step to providing some secrecy, I thank the member for Strathfield for bringing it to the attention of the House, and the Greens will continue to fight for transparency and accountability when it comes to this disastrous motorway project.
Well said.